My wife let me believe I was infertile. Then I found out she'd lied for years. I used to think infertility was the worst kind of quiet grief. It doesn't show up all at once like death or betrayal. It seeps into your life slowly, in waves of shame, disappointment, and self-doubt. You go through months, then years, of testing, tracking, hoping. And when nothing changes, you stop looking forward to anything at all. For the better part of 6 years, I thought it was my fault. I was the broken one. The one who couldn't give my wife the one thing she said she wanted more than anything. A baby. A family. A future that wasn't just the two of us sitting across the dinner table in silence, pretending we were enough. It started small. Missed opportunities. Bad timing. Then came the doctor visits. The fertility specialist who looked at me with practiced empathy while circling test results that confirmed what I already feared. Low count. Poor motility. Asterisks next to numbers I didn't understand but learned to hate. I remember coming home that day and sitting in the car for over an hour. I didn't cry. I just stared at the steering wheel, thinking about how this would change everything. How it would change how she looked at me. But it didn't. Not at first. When I told her, she didn't flinch. She took my hand, said, "We'll get through it." Said she loved me. Said it didn't matter. That night, I thought I'd never loved her more. But time has a way of stripping down sentiment until all that's left is the truth you didn't want to see. Looking back, there were signs. Subtle, like most betrayal is. The way she hesitated when I brought up IVF. The way she shut down completely when I mentioned adoption. The forced smile during baby showers, the quick change of subject when someone asked about kids. She always had an excuse. Money. Stress. Not the right time. She said we should travel more first, build our careers, buy a better house, as if those were real reasons to avoid the one thing she once cried about in the middle of the night. I didn't argue. I internalized. I punished myself quietly. I became obsessed with work, with self-improvement, with being a man worthy of fatherhood even if I'd never get the chance. And she just carried on. Calm. Kind. Emotionally distant but physically present. Like a roommate who used to be a lover. By the time we divorced, the reason had nothing to do with children, at least not officially. We'd grown apart. That was the phrase she used. It made me sound like a worn-out sweater. She cried during the signing. I didn't. A year later, I ran into her outside a bookstore downtown. She looked happy, lighter, younger somehow. She was holding a stroller. My heart stopped. I forced a smile and asked, "How old?" 6 months, she said. Then quickly added, "He's not mine. I'm just helping my sister." I nodded, said it was nice to see her. We left it at that. I walked back to my car in a daze, but I still believed her. Of course I did. I believed everything she ever told me. It wasn't until I got a call from our old insurance rep a week later about an old billing error from the fertility clinic that I found it. A single file. Scanned. Forgotten. And in that one page was the truth that unraveled every lie I had ever believed. T was buried deep in the insurance portal, a scanned intake form from 5 years ago, never mailed to us, never mentioned. The fertility clinic had filed it for coverage, but it never went through. I almost didn't open it. I was about to delete the whole message. But something made me click. Her name was on it. In her handwriting. Under medical history. She had checked a box I didn't even remember seeing during our appointments. Voluntary contraception, tubal ligation, prior. I read it 3 times, then once more with my hands shaking. It didn't make sense. That was a sterilization procedure. Permanent. Why would that be on her chart? I called the clinic. Told them I needed clarification. Said I was her husband, and we'd been treated there for years. The woman on the other end of the line sounded hesitant, but I could hear her typing. Then she said, "Yes, it's on file. It was done in 2011, before your initial consultation." I nearly dropped the phone. That was the year before we got married. We were still engaged. We had already started talking about kids. I hung up without saying goodbye. The world felt unreal after that. I sat in my living room in complete silence, listening to the dull hum of the refrigerator in the other room like it was the only thing tethering me to the earth. For 6 years, I blamed myself. I took pills, went to appointments, counted calendar days and symptoms like they were holy scripture. All while she let me. She let me suffer. The worst part? She comforted me through it. She whispered that we'd find a way. Told me I wasn't broken. Made love to me in those quiet, defeated moments like she still believed in us, when in reality, she had closed that door before we ever walked through it. And she never told me. I started going back through emails, texts, insurance statements. Everything that had felt off, but I'd ignored. There it was ill. A conversation with her OB-GYN about follow-up from an old procedure, her deleting appointment confirmations before I ever saw them. One folder in our joint Dropbox labeled Old Files, where I found a digital scan of her surgical paperwork. She had renamed it tax_docs_2009. It was all right there, hiding in plain sight. I didn't confront her right away. What would be the point? We were already divorced. She had already rewritten the story of our life together in her head. To her, I was probably just a sad chapter she skipped through. The part where she pretended to want something she'd already made sure could never happen. I thought about writing her a letter, laying it all out, telling her what that lie did to me. But then I pictured her reading it with that same distant look she used to give me toward the end, the one that said, "I'm not listening anymore." So I didn't. Instead, I printed the insurance form. I folded it up, and I kept it in my wallet. Not for revenge, not for closure, but because sometimes you need a tangible reminder that the worst parts of your life weren't just in your head. They were real, and they were done to you on purpose. After that, I stopped trusting my own memories. Everything felt contaminated. Every good moment we ever had felt hollow, like a performance she had committed to so thoroughly, even she started to believe it. But I hadn't been acting. I was really in it. I was really trying to build a life with her. I started replaying the early years, the honeymoon phase, the long walks where she talked about baby names, the way she would rest her head on my chest and say she could picture a little boy who looked like me running around the backyard. I used to smile at that memory. Now it made my stomach turn. There's a specific kind of grief that comes from realizing your reality was built on someone else's fiction. It doesn't just hurt. It scrambles everything. You question whether any of your decisions were truly your own, or if they were just reactions to a story someone else was writing for you. I stopped sleeping. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and stare at the ceiling, remembering things I hadn't thought about in years. Like the time I caught her crying in the bathroom and she told me she'd just gotten her period again. Or when I suggested a sperm donor and she looked at me like I had slapped her. I used to think she was overwhelmed, heartbroken, but now I wonder if she was just afraid I was getting too close to the truth. One night, about a month after I found the document, I saw her again. Not planned. I was at a mutual friend's housewarming party. I hadn't even known she'd be there. I almost left the second I spotted her in the kitchen, sipping from a wine glass and laughing like her world had never collapsed. But I stayed. She noticed me about 20 minutes in. Her eyes widened just a bit, then softened. She walked over like she wasn't sure whether to hug me or pretend we were strangers. I didn't help her decide. "Hey," she said. "You look good." "Thanks," I replied. "You look the same." She smiled at that, like it was a compliment. I could tell she wanted to say more. Maybe even apologize, though I don't think she ever truly believed she had done anything wrong. We ended up outside on the back patio. It was quieter there. She lit a cigarette, something she used to swear she'd never do. "So," she said, "how have you been?" I wanted to laugh. Really laugh. Like the kind of laugh that sounds more like choking. "I've been fine," I said. "I found something interesting the other day." "Oh yeah?" "Yeah. That intake form from the fertility clinic. The one where you checked the box that said you had your tubes tied before we even got married." Her expression didn't change at first, but her hand twitched just slightly, like she was trying to keep the cigarette from falling. "That was private," she said softly. "So was my life," I replied. She looked away. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she added. "But you did," I said. "You let me believe it was me. You let me grieve something I never even had a chance to begin with." She didn't respond. She just stared off into the trees, and for a second, she looked small, like someone who had finally run out of stories to tell. She didn't apologize. I think I expected that, maybe even hoped for it, in some twisted way. But all she did was finish her cigarette, flick the ashes into a flower pot, and say she should probably head back inside. I watched her walk away. Same walk I used to recognize in a crowd. Same posture, same curve of her back, same subtle sway of her arms. But it didn't feel familiar anymore. It felt like watching a stranger impersonate someone I used to know. That night, I didn't sleep either. I went home and sat at the kitchen table for hours, just staring at the old wooden surface where she used to eat cereal at midnight. I remembered how we used to joke about having a kid who would sneak downstairs at 2 in the morning and eat half the box. We even had names picked out. She suggested them. I never questioned her sincerity. It hit me then that I'd been grieving something that never existed. Not just a child, not just a family, but the version of her that I thought I loved. The woman I'd built my entire life around had been a version she let me believe in, while she quietly orchestrated an escape route. I thought about the doctor visits, the medications, the thousands of dollars, the tears, the nights I held her while she shook, thinking we were in the same pain. And the whole time, she was comforting me through a lie. That part still makes me sick when I think about it. I wanted to believe there was some reason. Some trauma she hadn't shared, some fear I never understood. Maybe she didn't trust me. Maybe she was afraid I'd leave if she told the truth. But even those explanations felt hollow. Because she didn't just lie to protect herself. She let the lie run our lives. And she let me fall apart quietly while she moved on. I told one person, my friend Marcus. He was there through the worst of it, the failed treatments, the drinking, the fights. I remember pacing his apartment years ago saying I just didn't understand why nothing was working. He told me to hang in there. Said maybe it wasn't meant to be yet. When I told him what I'd found, he didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, Jesus, man, that's not just a lie. That's something else. Yeah, I said. It is. He asked what I was going to do. I said nothing. There was nothing left to do. No court case. No confrontation. No explosive closure. Just the weight of knowing, finally, what had actually happened to my marriage. And maybe that was enough. In a way, the silence after the truth was louder than anything else. It didn't feel satisfying. It didn't feel like justice. But it felt final. I started going on walks again. Not because I thought it would fix anything, but because I needed to move. To stop sitting in the ruins. I passed playgrounds and parks and tried not to look too long. That part would take time. I deleted our old shared folder. I threw out the IVF pamphlets and the old calendars and the journals I used to track every failed cycle. But I kept one thing. That paper. Folded in half, worn from the wallet. Every crease a reminder. Not just of her lie, but of what I survived by finally knowing it. A few weeks later, I got a text from her. Just one line. I'm sorry for everything. I really did love you. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I finally realized I didn't need to. Those words meant nothing now. They might have meant something when I was still trying to hold our life together. When I was still hoping for answers. But now, it just felt like another layer of insulation between her and the damage she caused. I didn't reply. I deleted the message. She didn't reach out again. For the first time in a long while, I started thinking about what I actually wanted. Not what I was working toward for us. Not what I had accepted out of guilt or shame. Just me, standing alone in a life I had to rebuild from the foundation up. I wanted therapy. Real therapy. Not the performative kind we tried near the end, where she'd nod and smile and agree, only to go cold again once we got back in the car. The therapist asked me a question during our second session that stopped me cold. When was the last time you felt like your emotions were allowed to take up space? I didn't have an answer. I had spent so many years trying to be steady, strong, reasonable. She always needed me to be the one who calmed things down, the one who fixed everything. So when things fell apart, I blamed myself because it was the only role I knew how to play. I told the therapist about the folder, the procedure, the years of silence I endured while thinking I was the problem. She didn't interrupt or react. She just let me speak, let me feel it out loud for the first time. At the end of the session, she said something simple. That wasn't love. That was control dressed as comfort. That line stuck with me. I rolled it around in my head for days. Because that's what it had felt like. She never yelled, never called me names, never slammed a door. But she always steered things back to herself, to her needs, her vision, her version of the future. I was just the scaffolding. I don't think she was evil. I don't think she woke up every day plotting to hurt me. But I do think she made a choice, a series of them, to keep me in the dark, to let me rot in guilt, to protect her version of the story at the expense of my peace. And once I saw it that way, I stopped feeling broken. I started meeting friends again. Started laughing again. It wasn't easy. Sometimes I'd catch myself drifting, still going back to those years like they had weight. But the further I got from her, the clearer everything became. She remarried about a year after the divorce. Someone older, quiet, probably safer. I saw the photos online. She looked radiant. I didn't feel jealousy, just a strange sort of distance. Like watching a movie I used to love and now couldn't remember why. I never told her I forgave her, because I haven't. But I stopped waiting for the apology that would make it all make sense. Some things don't make sense. Some people lie because it's easier than telling the truth, not just to others, but to themselves. And that's something I finally stopped taking personally. A few months after that, I met someone new. It wasn't romantic at first. We were just two people in the same hiking group, complaining about the weather and laughing about how out of shape we both were. Her name was Kara. She had this honest way of speaking, not harsh, just real. Like she'd seen enough of life to skip the pleasantries. We started talking more. Grabbing coffee after hikes, texting about books, memes, the world. She didn't ask about my past, and I didn't volunteer much. It was the first connection I'd had in years that didn't feel like I was performing. One evening, we sat on a park bench after a long walk and watched a kid chase pigeons across the grass. She asked me, "Do you ever want children?" The question hit me harder than I expected. For a second, I felt like I couldn't breathe. "I used to," I said. Then I paused. "I still might. But it's complicated." She didn't pry. She just nodded and said, "Life usually is." There was something comforting in that. No pressure to explain. No reaction. Just space to let the answer be incomplete. Later that night, I lay in bed and realized how long it had been since I imagined a future without fear. A future where I wasn't afraid of being used or lied to or strung along with soft voices and empty reassurances. It made me think back to the early days with my ex. How we used to talk about the life ahead of us like it was already waiting around the corner. We said things like when instead of if. We had no idea what it meant to actually build something together, something real. All we built was an illusion. I spent years mourning the family I thought I lost. But it took walking away from that grief to realize something deeper, that I never really had it to begin with. What I had was the idea of love. A scripted version where I played the husband desperate to fix everything, and she played the wife too broken to try. Now, I wanted something else. Not perfection. Just honesty. I started journaling again. Nothing profound. Just little entries, what I was feeling, what I was avoiding, what I hoped for. One night, I wrote this down. She took my trust and turned it into silence. But I am learning how to speak again. That was the first time I felt proud of myself in a long time. Not because I was healed or over it, but because I could finally say it without flinching. A few weeks later, Kara invited me to a small dinner at her place. It was casual, no pressure. Just good food and conversation. Halfway through the meal, she mentioned she used to work with foster kids and how it changed how she saw parenthood. She said, "You don't have to make a child to be a parent. Sometimes you just have to show up when no one else does." That line sat with me for days. Maybe I wouldn't have the family I once dreamed of. Maybe I'd never get those years back. But maybe, just maybe, there was something waiting for me on the other side of that grief. Not a replacement. Not a distraction. Something new. Something mine. I didn't expect it to happen the way it did. One Sunday morning, Kara called me, her voice tight. Her friend from the foster center had an emergency. A teenage boy, 15, needed a temporary home. It was supposed to be just a few nights. No paperwork yet, just a warm place to stay. I told her yes before I could overthink it. His name was Jordan. Tall for his age. Weary eyes. He showed up with one backpack and a phone charger. That was it. I made up the guest room, tried to give him space. He didn't talk much the first 2 days. Just stared at the TV and picked at his food. I didn't push. The third night, we ended up in the kitchen at the same time. I offered him some leftover lasagna and he nodded. We sat at the table, eating in silence. He looked up and said, "You don't have any kids, do you?" "No," I said. "Not yet. Anyway." He nodded, like he'd already figured that out. "Good," he said. "Some people with kids don't know how to talk to anyone else." I smiled at that. Over the next week, he started to open up. Slowly. One-word answers turned into short sentences. He told me about school, about the last place he stayed, about how he hated when people acted like they were rescuing him. I told him I wasn't here to rescue anyone. I just had a house with too many empty rooms. One night, he was watching a movie in the living room when he asked me, "You ever think about what your life would be like if just one person had told you the truth earlier?" That question hit harder than I expected. "Yeah," I said. "All the time." "Me too," he replied. We didn't talk about it after that. But the silence between us felt different, like something had shifted. A quiet understanding. A few weeks turned into 2 months. The paperwork moved slowly, but it was moving. Kara helped where she could. Jordan stayed. The guest room started to look like a real bedroom. Posters on the wall. A pair of sneakers by the door. One morning, I came downstairs and found a note on the fridge that just said, "Save me the last Pop-Tart." It made me laugh out loud. I stood there, smiling like an idiot, holding the note in one hand and my coffee in the other, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. It felt like life again. I started thinking less about what my ex had taken from me and more about what I was building now, not to replace what I lost, but because I finally had room to grow something real. Something built on truth, even if it was messy and uncertain. I still keep that folded insurance form in my wallet, not as a wound, but as a warning, a reminder that silence can be just as cruel as a lie, that love without honesty isn't love, it's control. And maybe, after all this time, I was finally learning what love actually looked like. It looked like trust. It looked like someone asking to stay, and me saying yes without fear. It looked like a second chance I didn't even know I wanted. The night Jordan officially moved in, I found myself standing in the doorway of his new room, watching him hang a photo on the wall. It wasn't of anyone I knew, just a picture he'd taken at the beach once, the kind of shot you'd find on a postcard. He saw me in the reflection of the window and turned around. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just checking in." He nodded, then pointed to the photo. "That's where I want to live one day. Somewhere quiet. No yelling. No lies. Just peace." "You'll get there," I said. He shrugged. "Maybe." I was about to leave when he added, "You don't have to act like I'm your son or anything. I'm not looking for that." I smiled a little. "I'm not acting," I said. "I'm just here if you need me." He didn't respond, but he didn't turn away either. That was enough. Later that night, I sat on the back steps with a beer and let the silence settle in. For the first time in years, it didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. I thought about everything I'd been through. The years I lost. The version of myself I became to try and hold onto something that wasn't ever real. I had poured so much energy into being enough for someone who never truly saw me. And in doing so, I stopped seeing myself. But that part of my life is over now. The story I was trapped in, the one where I was the broken husband, the one who couldn't deliver, who carried shame like it was part of his identity, that story had ended the moment I learned the truth. Even if it came too late to fix the marriage, it came just in time to save me from staying stuck in it forever. And the truth is, I'm not broken. I never was. I was lied to, manipulated, grieved over something I never had the chance to build. But I survived it. And not just survived, I grew from it. I became someone who no longer needs someone else's version of the future to feel whole. Jordan came outside a little while later, sat next to me on the step. "Do you ever think about having a real kid?" he asked. I looked at him for a second. The porch light cast half his face in shadow. "I think I already do," I said. He didn't say anything, just sipped from his soda and looked out across the yard. Then he said, quietly, "You're not like the others." "Thanks," I said. There was something final about that moment. Not like an ending, but like the first page of something new. Not a redo, not a fix, but something honest, something that could grow. I don't think I'll ever understand exactly why she lied to me, why she let me believe I was the one at fault. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe she wanted control. Maybe she just didn't know how to love someone she couldn't mold. But I know what love isn't now, and I know what it can be. It's not a performance. It's not silence dressed up as support. It's not sacrifice made without choice. It's a seat at the table, a hallway light left on, a saved Pop-Tart, a boy who trusts you enough to stay. And sometimes, that's all the family you need.